Hi, I'm Claire, and today I'm going to be reviewing two novellas from Tor.com's Novella imprint. First we have Forest of Memory by Robinette Kowal, and then we have Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. These are both authors who I've read before and whose work I love, so I was very excited to get my hands on both of these books. First we have Forest of Memory by Robinette Kowal, and I received an advance review copy of this one from the publisher in exchange for an honest review. This is the story of Katya, whose job is to deal in authenticities and captures, to find cool vintage objects and sell them on, banking on the nostalgia of these items to make money. Because in this future, what has value is basically people's lived experiences. And what has the most value here is Katya's story of her lived experience that happens to her in this forest. Her memories of that time when her AI stopped working and suddenly she is cut completely off the grid, which is something that's completely unheard of. And Katya sees a man walks out of the forest with a rifle, having just shot a deer. But there's no recorded proof of this. It's just basically you have to take her word for it. And the story is Katya recounting her experience to someone who has paid her. So there's the idea that the events that happened to her are very unique and they are being recounted in a very unique way as well. There's this important thread in there of the uniqueness of certain experiences that I find really interesting. It's kind of a bit meta, and that's, I guess, slightly where the story lost me. I was really interested in the format and I liked it a lot on an intellectual level, but it didn't kind of hit me in the emotions the way that most of Robinette Kowal's work does for me. It really is a story of two halves. What happens in the story, the events, and then the way that the events are recounted. And of course you can't separate it. It's not a question of style over substance because both of them are part of the story and both of them inform each other. The themes in the story and the way that the story was written were all really interesting. It's just that it has a bit of an open ending, which is already not one of my favorite things, but it's also very short. It's under 80 pages of text, and like most of the Tor.com novellas that I've read so far, I would definitely read more in the same universe. As it was, I just thought that the events themselves that are being recounted didn't really pack the emotional punch that I know Robinette Kowal can do in other stories. But then again, the questions and the emotions and all that kind of stuff, that's supposed to come from the way that the story is being recounted. It's supposed to come from the kind of disconnect you have between the events and the way in which they are told. There is some very interesting, deliberate breaking of the fourth wall going on in this book. For instance, because the entire account is being typed on a typewriter one time, there are in fact deliberate typos in this book. It's really interesting for me as a writer to look at the distribution of those and to see that actually when there's a really important emotional scene, there's not really any typos to take you out of it. But when Robinette Kowal wants you to pay attention to the fact that this is a narrative within a narrative, then you have typos and you're able to remember, wait, this is on a typewriter being sent to a client still within the story. And I also think it's really interesting for me as someone who's read some of Robinette Kowal's other short fiction to see these recurring themes of memory and loss of control and identity and things like that, which are recurring in stories like Midnight Hour or The Lady Astronaut of Mars. Overall, I really liked it and I was intrigued, but I didn't really adore this in the visceral way that I do most of Robinette Kowal's other work. The Lady Astronaut of Mars and Midnight Hour both made me cry when I was reading them, and it wasn't the case here. It was a really interesting story though, and I'll definitely be picking up more of Robinette Kowal's short fiction because that is really something she excels at. Next Tor.com novella I want to talk about today is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This was on my most anticipated releases of 2016 list, and I'm so happy that I finally got my little grubby hands on it. For those of you who don't know, Seanan McGuire is an author, but she also writes music. A few years ago she wrote a song called Wicked Girls, which is on her album of the same name. The song Wicked Girls is about all the young women and girls in fairy tales and stories who have adventures in faraway worlds and then are sent back to have normal regular lives, like nothing mind-blowing and life-changing has happened to them. It's a beautiful song, and if you'd like to take a listen, I'll leave a link in the description box below of a video of them performing it at a convention. That is basically the main concept behind Every Heart a Doorway. The story takes place in a boarding school called Miss Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, and it's actually a school for children who have been to kind of these parallel secondary fantasy worlds and then have come back and are struggling to fit in and wanting to go back and not really understanding how they're supposed to fit in their regular lives anymore. And our main character is Nancy. She has just come out of an underworld. She lived in the halls of the dead, and then she had to return home, and her parents were glad to have her back, but also worrying, like, why was she all changed? So they put her in this boarding school that is supposed to help her kind of learn how to get past that and, you know, have some therapy and forget about all that stuff and become a productive member of society. Except, of course, the school is run by someone who knows that she's not delusional, that she was in fact in a different world, and who wants to help her not forget what happened, but reconcile herself to the fact that she may not be able to go back. I thought this was absolutely delightful. It did punch me in the feels once or twice, but that is kind of what I've come to expect from Seanan McGuire's work anyway. This was one of these books that I reserved specifically for reading in the bath because I didn't want to finish it too quickly. It was so wonderful. I just wanted to have a little piece of it at a time. The sheer amount of world building that is packed in this small book was so impressive. You've got all these like parallel worlds and secondary worlds that are laid out like logical and nonsense. One of them's an underworld, but one of them's a netherworld, and that's slightly different. And you've got these little explanations dribbled in where it never feels heavy. But once I had finished, I felt like I had a really good grasp of kind of how everything worked. Not necessarily in a very clearly laid out manner like you would have in, say, a Brandon Sanderson book where the magic is very clearly designed and you know all the rules, but a bit more like in a Diana Wynne Jones sort of way where you have some of the rules explained to you and the rest of the rules kind of make instinctual sense, and I think that speaks highly to Seanan McGuire's background. She has a degree in fairy tales, basically. The framework underpinning the story is quite strong, but then the story itself is kind of sparse in its writing, and there's some beautiful imagery that keeps coming back again and again and again. Now, the ending of this book is something that I've seen people refer to in other reviews, not being 100% about it, thinking maybe it ties up everything a bit too cleanly, and I can see that point, but I had all the feels about this, and yes, it's an emotional reaction. It's a strong emotional reaction, and I think that is worth a lot in storytelling. So basically, I loved this. I loved it a lot, and there are 2 more books coming out in the same universe from Tor.com, one in 2017 and one in 2018, and I am so excited for both of those. I will definitely be rereading this, I think, and I will definitely be getting the next couple books when they come out. So that's it. Those were my reviews for Forest of Memory by Robinette Kowal and Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read either of these books. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check out the sidebar right here for more videos, and if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button for new videos from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.